Hey everyone, I'm Gevin.
And I'm Dave.
And welcome to episode 14 of Lowlights. On this episode of Lowlights, we talk to one of Dave's besties, former Obama speechwriter and two-time New York Times bestselling author David Litt, about speechwriting, surfing, and his newest book, It's Only Drowning, out now. David tells us the story behind the title of his latest book.
And we were on the beach, and I was trying to keep it together and play it cool. And finally, his name's Matt. I was like, Matt, I got to admit, I'm a little bit scared. And he just looks at me and goes, hey, it's only water. And I was like, oh, thank you. Like, that's so reassuring. And he goes, hey, it's only drowning. And then he just runs into the ocean.
Opens up about how in one of his darkest moments, he turned to surfing.
It definitely became a way out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't consciously say I'm going to start surfing because I'm going through this period of depression.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that's so hard about depression is it makes you not want to do anything, or it makes you unable to do anything.
He reflects on how becoming a better surfer has made him a better person.
So that's when I first thought to myself, hey, what if I got much better at surfing, right? What would that do?
Right.
Both would be fun, it would be cool, but also I think I would be a very different and much better person.
And proudly shares the progress that he's made as a New Yorker in overcoming, in his words, his racism against people from New Jersey.
I feel like I grew up racist against people from New Jersey. And then it turns out good pizza, good bagels. And more than that, like, I think the best bagel in the world, probably, if you asked all the bagel people, is probably somewhere in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But consistent, really good bagel, I would choose New Jersey in a heartbeat.
And after the interview, Dave and I break down this week's sports highlights. From the MLB's home run leader, Cal Raleigh, being named to his first All-Star team.
What Cal Raleigh's doing is one of the great seasons for anybody in baseball.
To Red Panda's fateful fall. She did fracture her wrist, but like I said, Red Panda's resilient, and when she falls down, she gets right back up. And before we wrap, Dave shares his disdain for America's favorite bagels, according to Grubhub.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Who is out there eating? Okay, you all need to email me. Who is eating a blueberry? I'm a Jewish person. I eat bagels a lot. How many blueberry bagels have I eaten in my entire life, Gevin? The answer is 2.
This is Lowlights. Let's get into it.
All right, so we are starting this week with I'll be a little biased here and say one of my favorite possible guests. So David Litt is well, I think you can see he is a New York Times bestselling author. And he is now the author of the national bestseller It's Only Drowning. So this podcast was mostly an excuse for us to find a way of getting you all hooked such that you would be willing to listen to us when David published his book. This was really just a guerrilla marketing strategy. Mm-hmm. But I don't just know David Litt as an incredible author. I know him as an incredible friend and person who has been there for me for pretty much the last decade. Anytime I did anything crazy in my life, like start a podcast. And David, I think the most important thing for people to know about us is that we worked so close to one another in the Obama White House that we actually shared a wall. And I think when you left, I was the happy inheritor of like a couple of your, like you'd had like food squirreled away in your office that you didn't want to leave there, and you gave that to me. So I was always grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear this is new to me, actually. Or
yeah,
maybe I was responsible for it, but I don't remember this. I'm happy to.
It was very important to me. But you are a brilliant speechwriter, a wonderful person. We've actually known each other since even before that, since I was an intern in the Obama White House in 2011.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited and grateful that you've been willing to join us on the Lowlights podcast.
Well, great. This was very nice of you, to the point where I'm kind of like, okay, I think we're done here. This is good.
I think you should take Dave with you on your whole little
press we're just
push.
At every stop on the book tour, we'll just have him do that, and I'll be like, thank you, everybody.
Great. Have a good night.
Talk to y'all later. Yeah.
I think I think also you in your first enormously successful book, Thanks Obama, which you can also buy. They're both really wonderful holiday gifts and really make stocking stuffers. But in your first incredible book, Thanks Obama, somebody pointed out to me that I was the first person thanked in the acknowledgement section. And at first I thought, like, my gosh, David Litt could not have done this without me. I am the person who made this book possible. And then somebody else was like, well, isn't your name first alphabetically among the Obama speechwriters that he thanked?
People with those early letter names, it's like classic, hit a triple. Or
right, born on third base, right.
Of course I say this as a middle of the pack. They would do the Z to A's for fairness. It means, the L's are always in the middle.
That's true.
Right, exactly. But, I think...
I came on here to receive your praise and complain about something extremely esoteric.
But look, I don't, you can say whatever you want to the public. I think we both know the truth about why I was first in those acknowledgments. So,
I'm sorry, we're going to thank you in this one, but you consider...
Well, okay, look, before we get to the book and your career as a burgeoning athlete in the water. So let's go back about a decade to a nicer time in our country's history. So can you just give us a little bit of a sense of why it was that I encountered you in the Obama White House? I mean, speaking of being born on third base, was it like, you thought, when you were 10 years old, you saw the White House on television and you thought to yourself, yeah, I'm going to work there one day. That's realistic for me.
No, not in the slightest. Although, and I do want to say, so I think I have this right. The premise of the podcast is largely we're going to talk about like failure, right? Or like
correct.
Things that didn't go well. Okay, good. Because you've talked about the 2 books, which is great. This is my 3rd book.
Right. This is your 3rd book. You've done 3.
So I feel like we can talk about that also. And I think it's a good topic for this podcast. But the reason I ended up at the White House, well, I mean, there wasn't really a reason is a little bit of a strong word, right? I thought I was going to do comedy. That's when I was in high school. I did stand-up comedy. I grew up in New York, so I'd go to amateur nights and be surprised that like no one wanted my takes on the Bush administration, but they did think it was funny when I talked about being a teenager. Or like, I did high school talent shows, stuff like that. Then in college, I did improv and I edited a humor magazine and I interned at The Onion. And then in '08, I saw Barack Obama speak, I was watching TV and I saw him speak at the Iowa caucuses when he was running. And I kind of said, whatever he's doing, I want to be part of that. Right? And that led me I graduated in '08. So I went to Ohio, worked on the campaign as a field organizer. Then I moved to DC with no plan really, other than hope and change. That was the plan. Almost got fired from an internship in a recession, which was extremely difficult looking back on it. One of the more challenging things I've ever tried, and I almost pulled it off. And then kind of stumbled backwards into a speechwriting job. So first at a speechwriting firm called West Wing Writers that I know all 3 of us here are familiar with. And at the time, they're a big firm now. At the time, it was basically 4 partners and an office manager and me because all of their associates had just left to join the administration. So I got really lucky where I was suddenly like the senior most associate because I was the only associate 2 weeks after being an intern. And then that turned 2 years later into a job writing speeches for Valerie Jarrett, who was President Obama's senior advisor. And then that turned into a job writing speeches for the president. And that turned into eventually leaving the White House and writing a book about having written speeches for the president. And now we're here.
And, so one of the things that you're best known for is writing comedy speeches for President Obama. So you've talked a lot in the past about some of those stories, but for the benefit of some of our listeners who might not know about that history and might not know about this chapter in your resume, so or might not have read Thanks Obama.
How dare they? Yeah.
How dare they? And they're gonna fix that after this episode.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Tell for people who are listening, what's like when people say like, oh, well, did you write it? Were you involved with anything that I might have been aware of? How do you answer that question?
So the biggest thing that I was involved in that people might have been aware of was the correspondence dinners. And it's weird because it feels like we're talking about ancient history and we're talking about semi-ancient history where the president would go tell jokes once a year, right, in front of a bunch of Hollywood celebrities and journalists and political people. And so President Obama was really good at that, so it was like all things writing for for Barack Obama, right, I wrote some terrible speeches during my time at the White House. They weren't mostly terrible, but a few of them I know were really bad. And there was exactly one speech that just went really poorly, but almost every other speech, even if it was bad, he would read it, and then it's like Barack Obama's reading it. It's good, right? So that was a really nice
100%.
For a speechwriter. And you, the two of you know this well, most Washington, D.C. speechwriters have the opposite problem, where like they'll pour their heart into something, they'll write it, and then
absolutely.
They are like, how come the person I wrote it for made it worse?
George Bush had incredible speechwriters. Speechwriters.
And he actually, in fairness to him, gave some very good speeches, but also, some less good ones.
Exactly right.
I don't know. I feel it's weird. I met George W. Bush a couple years ago, and like everyone who's met George W. Bush can report that he is like the nicest guy. He reminded me exactly of my father-in-law because he's super nice. He paints. My father-in-law also paints. He's a Republican, should not be the president, but very nice to talk to. Right, I really enjoyed. It was an interesting moment because it was also weird where I was like, oh, the last time I really like my other memory of you is like sobbing when you won re-election. So we didn't talk about that. But
you didn't talk about that? That didn't come up? Okay.
No, but he did tell me not to invest in a tree farm. Anyway, so which I haven't since.
He told you not to invest in one particular tree farm, or like big tree farm.
The category. Yeah, he wasn't like, don't invest in that tree farm. It's no good. He was like, tree farms, don't do it. It's a waste of money.
Okay.
So now I know, and now your listeners know.
I was about to say, this is advice you can use. This is helpful.
Right.
It's funny because I was about to invest in a tree farm tomorrow, so thank you.
I've saved you from that fate. So, but you were asking about the correspondence dinners, and the way I always think about those is like they were unlike other speeches that President Obama gave. The jokes were team efforts, but if they had gone poorly for a bunch of the years where I was there, it would have been my fault. So
that's exactly right.
I was kind of like, putting out the bat signal to the different people pitching jokes. I was writing some jokes myself. And I think the one that like I was involved in that most people are most likely to have seen was when we had Keegan-Michael Key come as Luther, Obama's anger translator.
Yeah.
And then, he anger translated for President Obama live on stage. And that was really fun. That was also, it was an interesting moment because that was the first of those things that we really did focus more on the internet than the people in the room. Right. So we were like, oh, not only is this going to be funny and people are going to like it, but we think that people are going to watch it on the internet, which at the time was like a pretty bold idea of being like, oh, they're not going to watch the whole thing. They're going to watch some of it, but not all of it on screens. And, it's crazy that was 10 years ago, but it feels like 50 or 60 years ago. And so I think that got like 35 million Facebook views, which at the time was the most Facebook views of any government anything. And which, now it's sort of standard, right? Like that now if you're running for school board, you're expected to do that. So this stuff is changing so quickly. So it was interesting to be at the White House, for a president who obviously I admire a lot and who was really, really good at public speaking, but also to be there at this moment when what the nature of how presidents communicate with the public was changing really fast.
So, I think and we're going to get to the book, but I think that you've made the analogy that there are some comparisons about like working in politics and working in the White House and surfing, which is that there's a lot of waiting around, there's a lot of sudden action, and there are also like very significant wipeouts that occur. And I feel like I've heard you tell this story a couple times about one of the comedy skits at one of these correspondence dinners that did not go off as planned. And so in the interest of reminding people who are listening that not everything is sunshine and roses and working in the White House day to day is not always, the easiest of experiences. Can you remind us about that?
Sure. And I will say, I don't actually think I've said that about that comparison, which makes me really happy. Because I feel like, to me, it's a sign that you read the book and then are immediately making kind of like tortured surf analogies.
Well, that is where that came. I couldn't remember whether you'd said it or I was like, I wonder if he has said
this. To me, that's very validating because it's like, if you start to surf, you immediately start to everything. You're like, oh, that reminds me of surfing. And people are like, this is a grocery store, right? Like, please stop.
Right.
You can just buy the groceries. You don't need to tell me why this is like, picking out the perfect like mid-length surfboard. And so the fact that I have now, gotten you doing the exact same thing, I would take
impressive.
Much pride.
Good for you.
And so, but no, I think what you're talking about is the time when we had like a slideshow set up, and one of the slides went missing in between the rehearsal and the actual performance. And so,
and this is when President Obama, it was going to be like a slideshow behind him during his performance in front of however many thousand people in the ballroom. He
would do the setup, and then the slide was the punchline, right? So it's basically saying, and the worst part about it was I found this out when I was looking through the slides like 10 seconds before it happened. So that's a very long 10 seconds, right? Like that's the longest 10 seconds you will have ever experienced, I can tell you, for having lived it, where that the president is about to be embarrassed on national television and also in front of all these people, and it's your fault. And it hasn't happened yet, right? So it's like, I can see the future, and the future sucks. And there's nothing you can do about it. You're just kind of watching this tick down. And the thing I will say you were talking about the surfing part, is that surfing, I feel like, taught me at least a little bit better the ability to accept these things sometimes, right? You just like, you have to accept stuff. And actually that's strategic, not just like Zen or hippie-ish. I'm still not great at that, but I definitely was not great at that then. So I'm like trying to figure out what to do. The answer, of course, is nothing. And but President Obama, like, he figured out what's going on, ad-libbed his way around it. People liked it in the room because they could tell it was like, oh, he's getting, he's scrambling out of trouble. And he kind of made fun of, he didn't even actually make fun of anybody. He just kind of went like, he just kind of laughed, right? Like so much of the president telling a joke is that it's the president telling a joke. And that was something where he could just kind of be like, huh. And everyone was like, oh, he thought it was funny, so it's funny, right? And he was really good at that. He could just read the room and connect with people very, very well in a way that a surprising number of politicians, and I think the two of you know this, but people who do not work in politics don't realize this, the number of politicians who just are not good at what you would think of as an essential political skill, which is seeing what an audience is feeling and kind of having that instant bond and communication back and forth. Like, obviously, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump as a president, but he can do that with his crowds. You can see him do that in a way where it's like, okay, I sort of understand a little bit more of how this ended up happening. And then there's obviously, we could all name them, although I don't think we will, plenty of people, on the Democratic side who I admire a lot, but you put them in a room and they're kind of just doing their thing, right? It's not it's not an exchange with the audience. Yeah.
No, such a good point, and so true. All right, we've spent a lot of time not talking about your book. Let's talk about your book. I know Gevin has some questions to ask you.
Yeah, David, thank you. We've been teasing your book for the past 30 minutes. It's Only Drowning. We'll keep plugging it. Use promo code Lowlights Podcast.
Not a real promo. Not a real. Don't put that in.
See what happens, right?
See, we're right. You never know.
Yeah.
But great title. I know Dave was hoping you'd follow up "Thank You Obama" with "Thank You Dave," but there's always. I'm guessing that was the name of the first book. Well,
listen, there's another book in the works. Maybe we'll talk about that.
Cool. But we do want to get into it. When I think about the title, "It's Only Drowning," I think a lot of us could conceive of that applying to a lot of metaphorical sort of instances in our life. But for you, it applied quite literally to your journey of learning how to surf. But what I think is so powerful about this story of you learning to surf is that, as you talk about in the book, you took up surfing during the pandemic, which was a very difficult time for many of us. I think we all have our own just very bad dystopian memories of what life was like back then. And you talk about some of the mental health challenges that you faced during that time and how ultimately those challenges led you to the waves. So I'm wondering if you could just take us back and tell us the story of why you even started surfing in the first place.
Yeah. Well, let me start by talking about the title, and then I'll jump back into how I got started. So this book is about me learning to surf with my brother-in-law, who I say with very deep respect is a crazy person. And I've said this to him. But we're different in every conceivable way, including politically, but that's probably the least in some ways of our differences.
I think crazy people usually say that. I think that's what.
Well, no, that's why it's clear that actually the crazy part is like I asked him once how he had just gotten a new motorcycle, right? And like, let's start with, I would call it a motorcycle and he'd call it a bike. But if I called it a bike, I'd mean like a Schwinn.
Right. Yeah.
But so I asked him like, oh, do you go fast? Like, do you ride it, really fast? And he was like, oh, no, like only 100 miles an hour. Right. So like crazy. Right? And also the surfing. When I met him,
it goes together.
He surfed. And so I was like, oh, I'll never do that because that's for lunatics. Mm-hmm. And the first time the two of us surfed together was in New Jersey during a hurricane swell, which is sort of what it sounds like, right? A hurricane comes, if it doesn't hit the coast, if it stays just off the coast, it sends giant, extremely angry waves toward the coast, and surfers are like, oh, sweet, this is great.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, okay, I have to pretend to be happy about this. I was not happy about it. I was terrified. And we were on the beach, and I was trying to keep it together and play it cool. And finally, his name's Matt. I was like, Matt, I got to admit, I'm a little bit scared. And he just looks at me and goes, hey, it's only water. And I was like, oh, thank you. Right? Like, that's so reassuring. And he goes, hey, it's only drowning. And then he just runs into the ocean, leaves me behind. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, if I survive, I know what the title of the book about this is going to be. That's the good news, right?
Right.
So
the great news.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Right. It's doubling down, right? Either I'm not making it out of this experience, or I'm making out with a title for this book. And Gevin, as you said, I started during I started kind of post-pandemic. For me, what was really tough, I mean, the pandemic obviously was hard for everybody. Yeah. And I say this also, and I should as a lucky person, right? I think that was one of the
right, exactly.
The pandemic was like, on paper and also in life, right? I was very lucky. And also we were all kind of unlucky because we were living through a global pandemic. Both those things true simultaneously.
Yep.
And it was really after the Delta variant sort of broke through the vaccine. And also, right, there was the sense that the energy behind January 6th wasn't going away. And Vladimir Putin was beginning to suggest that he was thinking about invading Ukraine and starting land wars in Europe. And just, it was like this pile, right? Climate change was getting worse and worse and worse. Some of that now we look back on and are like, oh, those were, compared to now, I don't know. But some of those, it was that first moment when we realized all this stuff is not a blip, right? This is an era, and it might even be shaping the rest of our lives. Yeah. And I think I'd always taken the news personally, but that turned into a really bad thing. Like I would kind of be like reading the news and worrying, and Jackie, my wife, would say, maybe you should think about getting a hobby. And I would explain I already had a hobby, and my hobby was reading the news and worrying. So,
yeah, right.
And it got really bad, right? Like that was the first time. I've always been kind of high functioning, but also high anxiety. And that was the first time I've ever been really depressed.
Wow. And so did surfing become a vehicle for you to sort of overcome that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure I would use the word overcome, but I think it definitely became a way out, right? Like I didn't consciously say I'm going to start surfing because I'm going through this period of depression. Yeah. Because I think one of the things that's so hard about depression is it makes you not want to do anything, or it makes you unable to do anything. Yeah. Actually, that's the worst part. Is like, at least for me, it was like I wanted to do something different. I was like, this is not pleasant, and yet I don't feel like I can. And that was really brutal. Right. It was much more actively brutal than I would have imagined, and obviously, like, I've known people who have gone through depression. The thing I learned from inside it was how frantic it felt. And I think I started surfing partly because I finally took my wife's advice and was like, all right, time for a hobby, but also partly because I think in the recesses of my mind, I was like, well, nothing else that Matt does I could imagine doing, right? I'm not going to train to be an amateur Ultimate Fighter. I'm not getting a ton of tattoos.
Why not?
Yet. I think the key word is yet.
Yes, I think the word is ever, actually. So that was kind of where I was at, right? Was like, that's the, that one thing, right? The surfing, maybe I could do that. And originally, what I really liked about surfing was it just took my mind off existential dread. But ultimately, it became, I felt like not only am I distracting myself, I'm actually learning a ton about myself and being not just a surfer, but being a person in the world.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, oh, there's a book here. I was like, oh, I'm embarrassing myself.
Yeah.
I'm learning. And the stuff that I'm learning is not specific to me. Okay, actually, this feels like a book.
Yeah. Well, I think what's funny is that a lot of people, when they're going through mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, they turn to things that are relatively safe and low risk. They're safe and fun. I mean, pick up walking, running, listening to music, cooking. You picked something that could have, to your point earlier, very easily have ended your life right then and there, and involves a lot of failure until you get good at it. So what was that process like? And do you have any, I guess, sort of reflections on those earlier days when you probably were falling off the surfboard quite often?
The secret to picking up a dangerous hobby, it turns out, is not knowing it's a dangerous hobby when you pick it up. I didn't really have any idea, right? Like, I had listened to the Beach Boys, so I was like, okay, I have something.
Very good training.
Yeah.
Right.
It's also one of those things where you watch people do it and you're like, oh, that looks very, like, there's a lot of flow. And you're like, there's a lot of flow because they're doing a hard thing that they're good at. So you don't imagine yourself as much as you sort of see people who know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it was brutal. And I think actually I'm glad I didn't know that when I started, because the experience, not just of the failing a lot, but also the kind of low level danger and pain, right? One of the things surfing really accustomed me to, in a way that actually now I'm like beginning to lose that, was just a tolerance for like, not injury, but kind of constant you're in pain. So sore, but also like surfboards are very hard objects, and they, like, you fall and it hits you. Happens a lot, right? The, like a fin, like, catches you. Or some of that can be deadly. Most of the time it is.
You mean a surfboard fin, not a shark fin, right?
No.
Because I'm also thinking about the sharks.
Yeah, there were
that would be the deal breaker for me.
But the problem with surfing is, and sharks are not trying to eat you, right? They want to eat seals.
Yeah.
But if you're in a wetsuit,
right,
you look like a seal from the bottom. You know, a shark is not super sophisticated at determining seal, not seal. So it's like, I'll bite it and see what happens.
Right.
And then also, if you do a lot of thrashing around, you look like a wounded seal, which is particularly enticing.
No, I remember Shark Week. I watched a lot of Shark Week growing up on Discovery Channel. Well versed.
Well, what's interesting to me is, like, also even sharks, that was a place where I felt like me and Matt were obviously different in ways that now code onto politics, even though they should, right? So for me, I was like, at least intellectually, I was like, sharks are important for the ecosystem. Yeah. Shark conservation really matters, right? Demonizing sharks, like right. As a person who prefers that his internal organs remain inside, I was like, okay, it's hard to
and your blood,
live my values here. But whereas I think for Matt, it wasn't like anti-sharks. It was more like, whatever, don't worry about it. Yeah. And like, don't worry about it is not how I'm wired. And so it was, that in and of itself was pretty eye-opening. But we have, they track the sharks, not all the sharks. Yeah. They track just some sharks. Right. And when I was taking my first surf lessons, there was a shark, and it was like the shark had also signed up for surf lessons, because it started about 20 miles south of us. And then, like, each day as I got ready for my lesson, the shark also got ready for its lesson by moving to the beach where I was. And so this was Freya, the great white shark. And I was like trying to play it cool. And finally I was like talking to my surf instructor. I was like, did you know there's a shark, like a great white shark? And she was like, yeah, Barry. So like, okay.
Okay, so there are two. There's two.
Yeah, who's like a nice, egalitarian Nordic lady.
Sure. Yeah.
And then there's Barry, who's like a ruggedly individualistic American male. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, okay, there's a posse of sharks. I assume that's the scientific term in the water.
Very.
So it's one of those things where, there's a new shark that just came out, Dold. I don't know.
It just came out.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
He just dropped. Yeah.
Right. Just dropped.
It's a summer. Dropped for the summer.
Right. Right in time for Shark Week.
And I think is like a 13-foot or 11-foot great white juvenile male. Juveniles are the most dangerous because they're kind of sample. Right. Like most teenagers, they're experimenting a little bit. So they're like, I'll bite that, see it happen. I'll learn. But it is interesting to now be the kind of person, like I was out yesterday, Matt and I, and it was just the two, like we were pretty far south in Jersey, so there are no crowds. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a shark out here. All right, well, I'm not gonna worry about it. Right. And like, it is interesting to have that happen where I'm like, where did you come from? Right.
I was going to say, that's not the David Litt that I know.
Not the David Litt I know. But that's also, and I will say, it's not, I try to walk a fine line here because I'm not claiming to be a chilled person by any means. I'm claiming to be the most chill version of myself.
Wow.
Which is a extreme caveat. But so I'm like a big believer in being the most chill version of you. I'm not necessarily a big believer in like being a super chill guy because I feel like for some of us, that's not really realistic.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I don't try to beat myself up about that, but I do try to say, okay, like, like sometimes I'll just be like, well, how would a surfer handle this? And that often leads me to be like, well, I'll just go for it, or I'm just not going to worry about it. And that I found is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You're talking about, you're talking about accepting the possibility that your internal organs could end up being on the outside of your body, which it still terrifies
that would
me
be
just
bad.
to think about. That would be bad.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is, this podcast, we've talked to a lot of athletes and we were just talking to a former professional baseball player who was talking about how baseball is literally a game of failure. I mean, like,
am I the worst athlete you've had on the podcast?
I don't. Well, it depends. Like now, like I'm not sure. No.
Do you identify as an athlete though?
No, I identify as somebody who like does a sport for fun,
like an enthusiast.
Yeah. Like I don't identify as an athlete, as in like I like, for example, the book was in Surfer magazine, but not because
that's pretty cool.
My surfing, right? Like I identify as a writer. I was in Men's Health ran an excerpt too, so I feel like it's been fun to be in all of these magazines that are for people who are substantially more athletic than I am. And then like I'm hoping over time I'll be like, oh yeah, I was in Men's Health magazine, and then people will be like, why? And I'll be like, men's health,
yeah,
no one will look it up.
You might get an email saying you were nominated for an ESPY. Yeah, I don't just watch out.
I just can't wait for somebody to be like, oh, David Litt, the surfer, and for me to be like, yeah,
that's what he is.
I do, yeah.
I think it's like, I will say, if someone else surfs casually, I'll be like, oh, you're a surfer. But I mean that more as like, a certain set of things that most people who have surfed even a little bit start to know, right? There's plenty I don't know. That's one of the cool things about surfing, by the way, is each level or kind of each like increment of improvement, it's not just that you're getting better at surfing, you kind of have access to new experiences. And so part of the reason that like a surfer like me looks at a surfer like Matt, or a surfer who's like a world-class tour surfer with a lot of envy, is not just you're better at surfing, it's like things I don't know. I don't know what they are necessarily, but like you've seen.
Oh yeah,
it's cool. And that's different than other sports, I think, right?
I think it's kind of similar to running, though, like, because I think there's the same sort of, distinction there between, oh, yeah, I run versus I'm a runner. And my girlfriend and I go back and forth about this all the time. It's like, to identify as a runner, it's almost like you have to participate in some way in the running community. You have to be on Strava. You have to, shop at a running store. Right. And I think it's a similar kind of thing where it's like, to your point, you have access to a set of information, a new community that renders one a runner or a surfer.
Right. Do you have an interest
or a golfer? Right. Yeah.
It's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But you were saying that you had what kind of athlete? Or you had a bunch of athletes?
Well, so we've had a bunch of athletes on the show, and we had one who had been a professional baseball player and talked about how baseball is literally a game of failure. That if he would only get out or strike out strikeout is a little different, but if he had gotten out like 70% of the time or 65% of the time, that's him doing really well. And I sort of feel like we can all relate in various ways to that. I mean, even you, in all of the various things that you've done before you became a surfer, as a speechwriter, I feel like failure and people editing your work or not liking it is part of the profession, in the same way that being a comedy writer and trying to write for television involves bombing at various times. And so I'm just wondering, like, part of this, again, is to talk to young men who are going through tough times and are struggling and at times failing. And I'm just wondering, like, has anybody in surfing or in comedy or in politics, has anybody ever said anything to you that about failure and about that being a part of your process that doesn't just sound like a bumper sticker, but is actually helpful and that you've repeated to yourself at various times?
Yes, but I also think that almost inevitably when the word failure gets involved, it does sound a little bumper stickery.
Right.
So yeah, there's a bunch of different, like there's a lot of threads to this sweater. So one of them is there's a big difference, I think, between what your athlete guests are talking about and what most of us live with, which is the public nature of failure, right? So I absolutely sent a lot of speeches in to Cody Keenan, who was the head writer when I was on the president's team, and they would come back with a kind of chainsaw massacre of red track changes in Word, right? And you're like, oh,
can relate.
I thought this
Thanks,
was,
Dave.
and then you come back and then you accept the changes, and you're like, oh no, this is like much better. Crap, I thought I was good at this, but then the president would go give the speech and everyone would be like, oh, you did such a good job. And you'd be like, oh, thank you. Right. Like so it wasn't, not everyone has to see that process. I do think that athletes, that's a very different thing, especially for a sport like baseball, or like Roger Federer had that commencement speech last year. Oh, yeah. I was curious. I was like, did you write that?
Totally. I was wondering who wrote that. It was so good.
I've been wondering that too. I have theories. We can talk about them, when we're not recording.
Which David wrote it.
Yeah, tutorial. But I was like, nah, I have theories, But so I think that like failing or falling short in public is very different and it's very scary. I do think that that was something I learned through surfing, and that to get over the fear of being embarrassed in public was very helpful. And it's not the answer isn't to just not be embarrassed in public, because it kind of happens. It's you have to go ahead and do it. Stand-ups will talk about that, right? You have to kind of be in denial a little bit. Mike Birbiglia talks about that.
Right.
So you have a lot of that. But I don't think the best thing I learned about failure, even though it was phrased a little differently, was I had a surf lesson with this guy named Jamie. He was probably 19. And so I was like, how long have you been surfing? He was like, oh, I've been surfing forever, like 7 years, since I was in middle school. And I remember what it was like to be young enough that people were made nervous by how young I was, right? Like my first, second, third week in the White House, I walked into a deputy chief of staff's office, and she turned to her aide and said, he's very young. This makes me uncomfortable. Right? Like that was, and I had to sit there through a meeting and kind of go through a speech. And then as a surfer, suddenly this got reversed, right? Like my life is in the hands of someone who doesn't remember 9/11.
Right.
And so I was a little skeptical. And then he actually turned out to be a really good instructor, and he said something. And it was funny because he kind of said it, he kind of like as though he were old and wise and I was like young and naive, which in that moment I guess was kind of true. It was like when I started out, I fell, I wiped out maybe 4 of every 5 waves, and it's incredibly frustrating. And you just have to tell yourself, I'm a better surfer than I was before that wipeout. Right? That's the thing really for me convinced me that what I was learning was actually not just about surfing. Yeah. Because I started to do that in writing too, right? I mean, I'm sure the two of you have had days you sit down and you write and you're like, oh, every bit of this was bad. Right.
Absolutely.
I'm a good writer, but this was not a good day of writing. And I started to be able to say, okay, this sucks. I'm not denying that, but I'm a better writer than I was before I sat down and wrote, 2,000 words of complete unusable garbage. I ran my wife's sports leggings through the dryer on regular instead of double dryer low, and I say, I'm doing laundry this week.
You're like, I'm a better husband now.
Yeah, right, exactly.
He didn't agree with that one, but
Jackie feels.
I would say there's a limit to how much you can apply this lesson in your life. But I kind of started to have that sense of being a better surfer is making me better at being a person, and so that's when I first thought to myself, hey, what if I got much better at surfing? Right? What would that do?
Right.
Both would be fun, it would be cool, but also I think I would be a very different and much better person. And I think that's probably true.
Yeah. How did putting yourself out there as a writer with your name on your book differ from being a speechwriter when no one knew that you were the one behind a set of remarks. So you bring up this idea, this this difference between private failure and public failure. And I imagine, I mean, you hinted at it earlier, there have been moments through your writing career, not speechwriting, but writing career, where you failed in a more public way than you may ever have done as a speechwriter.
Well, I would say a couple of things about this. And Dave, I know you've run for Congress, which is very public. Right?
Correct.
Kevin, I don't know if you have a similar experience.
I've never run for Congress. Nope.
Do you write your own you're
yeah, I do write a lot.
Yeah, you write under your own name all the time. Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
You know how this is then. I feel like for me, like, just to give you an example, right? So my first book came out, New York Times bestseller. Very happy about that. Mm-hmm. My second book came out in the middle of the pandemic, like June 2020.
Yep.
It didn't totally bomb, but like usually when I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, you're writing a second book now," and I'm just like, "Yep," I just move on. I think it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with it, but a huge part of coming to terms with it is the fact that nobody cares because people are mostly just focused on themselves, right? Mm-hmm. If you do something and it, if you're like, I'm an investor and I wasted all your money, they're gonna care. Yeah. But most of the time, right, if I'm falling off a surfboard or I write something that isn't received the way I was deep down hoping it would be received, it's not that everyone is sitting around talking about me, right? That's like it's extremely narcissistic. So once you get into that space where you can say most of the time, right, people move on very quickly from other people's failures because they're busy thinking about their own lives. Yeah. And right, in the same way that I'm not, fixated on other people's failures or successes, frankly, sure. And certainly less so than I used to be. And right. I think that is, it's kind of liberating in a way. And I say all this stuff aspirationally as much as anything else, right? Some days I can sort of practice what I preach and some days I can't. But I think on the days when I practice what I preach, I'm a lot happier and also better at whatever it is that I hope to be doing, right? All of the worrying about how your thing is going to be received is not work. It just feels like work. It takes energy, but it's not work. Part of why I'm caveating this is, so I'm downstairs as we talk about this, and I know that Jaggy is upstairs and she can listen, and she's like, "Yeah, I keep trying to tell you that." So I present this purely as things I know that sometimes I can apply.
Right. Well, I mean, and I'll just use this as a plug. I don't have the physical book, Democracy in One Book or Less, with me, your second book, but it is fantastic and really interesting. And there's great stories about you getting drunk at Mitch McConnell's frat and giving a history of the filibuster in the House. So let this be a plug for all of your work.
I'm gonna add something to that, actually, which also sort of relates to the surfing, which is I am not the kind of person who says, it doesn't really matter, like, did it sell as many copies as I hoped, right? I forget how it did, but it was like, somewhere between the worst possible scenario and the one I was hoping for. And I'm not the kind of person who says that doesn't matter, because you want the outcome to be the outcome you want. What I have learned is to be the kind of person who says more than one thing can matter simultaneously. So when I went to Costa Rica on a surf retreat, they would film me, right? They filmed all the beginner surfers. And there were waves where I was like, that was awesome. I caught that wave. I looked so fucking cool. And then I would watch it on video and I'd be like, that's the most embarrassing display I've ever seen a human engage in. And what I eventually came to realize is both of those things are true, right? The feeling I had on the wave was real. And also the fact that I needed a lot of improvement as a surfer was real. And it wasn't saying, I don't need it, the video doesn't count because it felt awesome, or the feeling doesn't count because the video proves that I suck at surfing. It was saying I have to be able to hold both these things in my head at the same time. So we're talking about, for example, that book, right? It's like, I'm really proud of that book. It's a really good book. Also, I wish it had done better, right? I wish I read it. And but being able to do both takes some of the pressure off, because then you don't have to say, first of all, it's more true. But second of all, you don't find yourself saying, hey, this was a success or this was a failure. You kind of just keep going. And that's I don't know if you found this with athletes, but I've worked with athletes the thing they all talk about is just consistency, right? Like that's
Absolutely.
the thing they value so much more. And it's the thing that I ended up valuing when I was writing speeches in the White House. I don't know if you all had the same experience, but for me, it was like the hardest thing about it was to do the same quality of work every day. It wasn't like flashes of brilliance, which I think are overrated. Yeah. It was just like, can you be, doing solid, good work every single day, no matter what else is thrown at you?
Yeah. Trust. And that's what I would tell a lot of people, both times I was in the White House, was just like, I don't care about you being, I didn't think that we were all there because we were the 7 best writers in the world. We were there because people could, you were, but I was there for another reason. But it's basically just trust that people are trying their best, that they're going to do. Yeah. I mean, you have to cross some threshold, but beyond that, it's like, trust that you're going to do the right research, trust that you're going to get it in on time, trust that you're going to, take the feedback and implement it and talk to the people that you need to talk to, to get it where it needs to go eventually to over the finish line.
I always think of it as being tied for first, right? Like, I was super ridiculously lucky to get a job in the White House, especially when I was, pretty young. And I know people who are just as talented who did not get that job, or at the time, right? And then there have been moments in my life since where I'm like, oh, I got unlucky, whatever, that's life. What I do think is important, though, is I'm not like, oh, it's purely luck. Right? I'm like, oh, of all the people who were tied for first in that group, I feel like I got very lucky. And that's how I kind of can try to balance those things, where you don't think like, oh, I definitely deserve these good things purely. There's some luck involved. At the same time, you also are not the person who's like, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, well, yeah, you have to have a little belief in your own abilities, but without saying, as you pointed out, right? It's not like, oh, we're the only people who can do this. It's kind of like when you go to like a fancy pants college and they give you a big lecture about how they could throw out the incoming class and replace it with all the people who didn't get in, which is true, right? Like that's kind of any selective institution is going to be like that. I'm sure that's, there's the occasional athlete, right? If you're Tom Brady in his prime, you're probably not.
Thank you for making that reference on my behalf. Thank you.
The interview is over.
That hurt.
Bye. I gotta go.
Yeah. Right. But all right. Well, look, David, I actually kind of want to talk to you for a few more hours, particularly about Tom Brady. But
you know where to find me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I can't do that. So instead, we're going to finish up, as we do with all of our guests, with a few lightning round questions. So we are going to start off with the first one. So favorite, let's say, movie doesn't have to be about sports, but favorite movie that you feel like maybe during the pandemic was a comfort watch for you, or just in general, like you feel good when you're watching that movie. What is it for you?
You said sports, so I'm going to go sports. Little Giants. That movie's great.
Real David versus Goliath story.
It's on the plane, like a lot of planes now.
Yes.
It's in their roster. And some of those movies that you watched as a kid, and then it's on the plane, and you're like, "Oh, this is gonna be great," and it falls apart.
No, it doesn't hold up. Right?
Giants holds up 100%.
Absolutely.
And I had a huge crush on Becky the Icebox O'Shea.
Icebox, right? The Icebox. Yeah.
Yeah. Which now I feel like is that part would be weird if it was still, because I have a.
Devin Sawa? Is that who else is in that movie? Is that I think that's my memory.
Rick Moranis is in it.
Rick Moranis.
And Ed.
What's his name from Married with Children? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Modern Family, right.
Yep. And then that kid who was in everything. Actually, all the kids who were in everything.
Oh yeah, all the kids who were in everything in the 90s. It's a classic that kid movie.
Yeah.
Not only have I not seen that movie, but I've never heard of that movie.
Oh, yeah. Gevin.
Nor have I heard of any of the actors you just mentioned.
Rick Moranis? Gevin, as a former NFL employee, you're going to need to. I recommend Little Giants. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna work on him. All right. Number 2, music. What's the music that either you would listen to pick yourself up after some of those bad surf lessons, or maybe like after doing really well
yourself
that you want to put on
before the surf lesson?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Wait a second. I'm not done with Rick Moranis. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I've watched that movie.
The dad from Honey.
I've watched that movie. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ghostbusters,
We're
etc.,
good.
etc.
Yeah, sure.
Now that we have cleared that up, I don't know. I've been on a huge Chappell Roan kick, so that's been all of my like. Here's another difference between my brother-in-law and me. So he's like a death metal guy. Like he's really into Austrian Death Machine. I asked him at one point because I've been talking with him about like, you know, basically I've just been talking about him for a week, which he's surprisingly okay with, which I appreciate. So somebody had for an interview.
How much of a cut are you giving him?
But they were like,
I can be okay with anything for enough of a cut.
A cut of that lucrative nonfiction book money. So he you know, I was talking with him because somebody had asked, and I was like, by the way, Matt, like what's like your favorite song? And he was like, Soiled the Stillborn. And I was like, is this a joke? And
what?
He's like, yeah. And then I listened to it, and I will tell you, it's not my favorite song. So anyway, that's what he works out to.
I think Rage Against the Machine is as far as I'll go in that direction.
I can work out like girl empowerment pop. So like Taylor Swift, Chappell Roan, Lizzo, Carly Rae Jepsen, right? Like that is my running and or other workout.
Yeah, you reference Lizzo in the book. That's the second. You really are a fan. Okay. She's great. I mean, she's great. Good choice. Good taste.
Yeah, it's like here's my hot take. Lizzo's good at music.
Okay, and then when people say comfort food, what comes to mind for you?
Bagel with cream cheese and lox.
You are a New Yorker.
Around the corner from Barney Greengrass, which is like one of the temples of cream cheese and lox. So that's where I go back to. Although I will say New Jersey, and I can't would never have believed that I would be saying this, but New Jersey, fantastic bagels.
Coming from a New Yorker, coming from you, I feel like that is I'm sure that's well earned.
Yeah. You're making progress in your racism against New Jerseyans, as you mentioned in a recent interview.
Yes, I feel like I grew up racist against people from New Jersey, and then it turns out good pizza, good bagels, and more than that, like I think the best bagel in the world, probably, if you asked all the bagel people, is probably somewhere in New York. But consistent, really good bagel, I would choose New Jersey in a heartbeat over just walking into a random store,
right?
Jersey or New York. So
wow, I think that's a take I agree with. And when you're in Los Angeles sometime, Courage Bagels is worth a try as well. Really? In that regard. Yes, not a traditional bagel, but worth a try.
Okay, you whatever the opposite of you had me at, you know, it's like you had me at hello, like you lost me at non-traditional bagel, but
they're like low carb bagel thins.
No. It's just like it's a little
rainbow colored.
Crunchier. Yeah. Look, you don't have to take just my word for it. Phil, somebody feed Phil. It's like his number one. So,
but he's an LA guy now, though. I like.
Yeah, I know. With the East Coast mourns that he's become a real West Coaster. But on that note, the David Litt, you are you're so kind to have spent this much time with us. You're so it is. If I didn't enjoy reading your writing so much, I would be sort of baffled and infuriated that you were able to churn out such good content. Let me show the viewers what this looks like again. It's Only Drowning. It's available anywhere that you buy books. It's a great book. It's a great read. And David Litt is a great guy. Thank you so much for joining us.
David Litt.
Thank you, Kevin. This was fun.
All right. So we're back. It's just me and Gevin, and I hope people can tell from the interview. Like
just me and Gevin? Wow.
You're stuck with us. But I think people can tell from the interview. David's just so great, and I'm so glad that he has become a writer in his own regard. Because
are you talking about yourself in the third person, or?
Yeah. No. To my mom's dismay, I do go by Dave these days. But like. You know, there would be times in the White House where I would see a speech from David like a draft from David come out, and I'd be like, oh my God, I know one of the great writers in the world. But nobody else really got to know. Like, I would just be like, you guys can't even believe the drafts I get to see go around. But now the whole world gets to see what a great writer David is, because as we talked about in the interview, he publishes under his own name. So anyway, definitely buy the book. Super fun. What could be a better beach read? Anyway, great conversation.
Yeah, no, agreed, Dave.
So, all right, but Gevin, what's going on in sports?
Yeah, Dave, I don't know about you. This is a sad time, I feel like. For me, it's a sad time, probably for you, and a sad time for sports fans around the country. And that's because there's just not a ton of sports going on right now. No NFL.
Excuse me, outside of baseball, outside of Major League Baseball.
mean, you know that in my power rankings, MLB is like even below the NHL. And no disrespect to the NHL. I love me some hockey, but we don't have any NHL. We don't have any NBA. We don't have any NFL. We do have baseball. And we're going to get to that, but I think one of the biggest headlines we've had in the past week in sports, Wimbledon is in full swing.
I thought you were going to do that.
Swing and a miss. I just wanted to take that pun off the table before you got into the MLB. I wanted to claim that for tennis. You couldn't use it, but
yeah,
Wimbledon is in full swing. Lots of great tennis on display over in the UK, but I will say a few words about the MLB, and I want to start by giving a huge shout out to Cal Raleigh, who goes by nickname Big Dumper, which I think is one of the most insane nicknames across professional sports. There've been some great nicknames throughout sports history. Black Mamba, Sheriff, Benny,
the Goat.
The Goat. I don't know who you're talking about, but the Goat. Lots of great nicknames, but I think Big Dumper's got to be top of the pile. And the reason why they call him Big Dumper is because he's got a big dumper. And, that's all I'm going to say about that. But Cal Raleigh is a catcher in the MLB. And if you know anything about baseball, the catchers don't really, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, catchers don't really hit the ball as often or as well typically as certainly as a designated hitter or the other positions that hit more and often hit better. He's leading the MLB right now with 33 home runs. And just to give a little bit of context here, the second most home runs in terms of catchers, 17. So he's pretty much, that's a 2-to-1 ratio, and insane. I think that just goes to show his absolute dominance right now in the MLB, with more home runs than Aaron Judge, with more home runs than Shohei Ohtani. And in recognition for the dominance that he's displayed out there this season, he just was voted to his first All-Star game. So huge congratulations to Cal Raleigh, an MLB All-Star. He plays for the Seattle Mariners, who will be coming to play the New York Yankees next week. And I'll be seeing them play. Very excited about that. So I'll be sure to break it all down during next week's episode. Did you want to say anything about Cal Raleigh, Dave?
I mean, I won't go on forever. I'll just say, number one, congrats to Mariners fans. Seattle Mariners fans are long suffering. That team has never played in a World Series. They haven't made many playoffs, and they're great fans. And so, they deserve this. And just for people who are listening, to just give a little bit more context, the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run chase, when it was clear that one of them was going to break Roger Maris's home run record of 61 home runs in a season, was the biggest news story in the country in 1998. Cal Raleigh is almost on that pace. Yeah. They had, I think McGwire had 37 home runs by July 4th. And, Raleigh didn't quite have that many, but that's a ridiculous achievement for any player ever in the history of Major League Baseball. And he's a catcher. Yeah. Like I said to you before we were recording, it's like if a tight end in the NFL had, was on pace to have 20 touchdown catches in the season, or whatever. And I know Rob Gronkowski had some great years, and Kelsey and Tony Gonzalez, but this is what Cal Raleigh is doing is one of the great seasons for anybody in baseball. And it's just, again, I said it before, say it again. This is a great time to watch baseball. If people have not been watching baseball, putting aside how the Red Sox have played for most of this year, if people have not watched baseball in recent years, there's just so much talent in the league and so many fun teams. And I encourage, take a little bit of time, watch some baseball.
Yeah. All right, cool. So that's the MLB. The last sport we want to talk about is the WNBA. We've got some great basketball being played day in and day out. I've gone to a couple WNBA games. I'll go to one more until the season's before the season's over. Hopefully, Dave will also do the same out there in LA. But some big WNBA news this week. First of all, the Indiana Fever won the Commissioner's Cup. So shout out to the Indiana Fever.
Shout out.
Even despite the fact that Caitlin Clark was injured there toward, I think, in the championship game. So just, talk about the team rallying and coming together to get that dub. Congrats to them. But some sad news from that Commissioner's Cup championship. And that's that. The legendary Red Panda.
Red Panda. Shout out Red Panda.
If you don't know who Red Panda is probably one of the most talented and renowned performers of her generation. You might know her if you've ever watched a WNBA halftime show as the woman who comes out riding a unicycle, probably about yay high, double yay high, probably about 12 feet off the ground. She pedals around while balancing some ceramic bowls on top of her head. It's like America's Got Talent on steroids. Unfortunately, during the midst of her, pretty much right at the start of her halftime performance, took a real nasty tumble. And the whole audience, the whole crowd just gasped. Would Red Panda get up? But Red Panda's a fighter, and she's resilient. And although she fell down, she got right back up. Now we have a statement from her agent. Red Panda's agent thanks. Her agent says that Red Panda thanks everyone for all the kind wishes and support. It means the world to her. She did fracture her wrist, but like I said, Red Panda is resilient, and when she falls down, she gets right back up. So I'm confident that we're going to see Red Panda back out there by the end of this WNBA season. Prayers up for Red Panda. We're thinking about you. We're praying for you. You're the
Come talk about that low light on the Lowlights podcast.
That's right.
Invitation's always welcome.
Right. And if anything could top that Red Panda news in WNBA, it's that the league announced this week or last week that they'll be expanding the number of WNBA teams across the league. So Cleveland, Philly, Detroit will all be getting a WNBA team over the next few years. So the league, I think, is now going to be up to 18 teams, which I think is great. And I think it's a testament to just the growth that the WNBA has been experiencing and that women's sports in general, in this case basketball, have been experiencing over the past few years. I think this is just a objectively really good thing. I'm really happy that these iconic American cities, Cleveland, Philly, and Detroit, will get a WNBA team. Dave, sorry, Boston still does not have one, but maybe it'll be next.
So Detroit and Cleveland already had teams.
They did,
and they're getting them again. But I think
the Cleveland Rockers, I think they were called.
Yeah, I think that's
Rockers.
Because of the
Rock
Hall of Fame.
Exactly, Rock Hall of Fame.
But I think what's interesting to me is just in terms of like a business and marketing in this league, like I think a few years ago when San Francisco got a WNBA team, they paid something like a $50 million fee to join the WNBA. And now that like Aisha Wilson has become a superstar with the Aces, and you've got Caitlin Clark and you've got Angel Reese, and the league is really like having a moment. These franchises had to pay a $250 million franchise fee. And so like for, 5 times growth in just a few years is really wild. So
agreed.
Yeah, Boston's complicated, like with the Connecticut Sun and the Bruins owning TD Garden, all this boring stuff that makes it difficult for Boston to get a team. I'm still hoping that it'll hapen, but in the interim, oh my gosh. In the interim, there's a lot of great teams out there, and I still got to pick a team to root for because I don't have a rooting interest in the WNBA, so I gotta find somebody. Find somebody to root for. You got a rooted interest in the Atlanta Dream. We'll take it. Yeah. All right. Actually, I have to say, I like that. I wasn't a big fan of their former ownership, but I like how that team responded. Well, me neither. No. Right. So I like how that team responded. So you got something there. Great name. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, cool. So those are the highlights from this week in sports. Dave, let's play some games. All right. So I know that. Let's see. The first one that I want to ask you. Let's do it based on the interview that we just did. So David was telling us about his favorite music. He's into a bunch of pop stars. And like he really did. If you go in the book, like he talks about like going for runs and listening to Lizzo, and he referenced Lizzo again with us on the podcast. So so my question though, Gevin, is not about your favorite music. No, that would be too easy. My question for you,
can't get that wrong,
is now this is a source of a lot of controversy, but I'm going to ask you to name the top 5 best-selling music artists / groups, not just solo artists, of all time. Now, I will tell you, this is a long-running debate on the internet, but we are going to go with the best, most trusted source of news, Wikipedia. I'm going to go with Wikipedia. I'm going to go with their estimate of who has sold the most based on total certified units. And I'm going to ask you to name the top 5, and I'll give you some hints along the way. But you've got 5 of these 5. 3 are solo artists, 2 are bands. Go.
Okay. Let's start with who I assume is number 1, the king of pop, Michael Jackson.
So on this list, Michael Jackson is number 2.
Number
correct.
2, okay.
Number 2, Michael Jackson is correct.
Bob Marley?
Bob Marley is not on this list.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the bands for a second. The Beatles, are they number 1?
The Beatles
are
number 1 on this
Number 1.
list. That is correct. All right, you have the number 1 and number 2. You've got 3 more. 2 of them are the United Kingdom. 1 of them is from the United States. All of them are older school.
Wait, you said 2 are from the UK and
2 UK, 1 US.
Okay, I wonder how those intersect with the bands and versus
the one from the US is a solo artist, old school. Not alive when I was born.
Otis Redding?
No, good yet. No. The people still make a pilgrimage to his former
Elvis
home.
Presley.
There you go. Elvis Presley. Number 3. And these people, I mean, the estimates are insane here, Gevin. Like,
yeah.
Number 1, the Beatles, they claim to have sold almost 600 million records. Michael Jackson's at 500 million.
Wow.
Elvis Presley's at 500. I mean, these are pretty wild numbers. All right, Elvis is number 3. You got 2 more. 4, he is still making music and still did a collab.
Elton John.
Correct. Bang. Elton John. All right. Now the 5th one is very hard. It is not. It's a UK band. I'll give you that hint. And it's not. I would have guessed some other ones. It's not the first one that comes to mind, but it is a good one. You probably hear one of their songs every time a team wins the Super Bowl.
The who?
We are the
Queen. Queen.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Queen is number 5 on this list, and to your point,
interesting.
That surprises me because they just edge out Madonna. It's like right there, with Madonna. But I would have guessed the Rolling Stones.
That's what I was going to say too. When you said I wouldn't guess it, I was like, okay, not the Stones then. Okay.
No, I know. I would have guessed the Rolling Stones, but they're further down. I mean, only 200 million albums sold. Like they're doing just fine, but they're further down the list. And that surprises me. There are some rankings I see on here that have Pink Floyd ahead of them, which I never would have guessed.
What about like AC/DC?
Yeah, AC/DC's on the list, but they're at about 200 million as well.
Bob Marley, where's Bob?
And where is Bob Marley and the Wailers?
Brethren Bob.
No, way down the list.
Where you did, Bob? Where you did?
Yeah, way down the list at 75 million. Only 75 million.
Only 75 million? What?
Only.
Wow.
Yeah.
Insane.
All right, so that's music.
Yep. Okay, Dave. Well, for those who listened to the interview, we asked David what his comfort food was, his go-to comfort food, and he said, "We get it right." He said bagel with cream cheese and lox. That's his comfort food. So, Dave, along those lines, I know you're also a fan of bagels.
Correct.
So I'm sure you keep up with the bagel trends. So I'm going to ask you, can you name the 5 most popular bagel flavors according to Grubhub?
The legendary bagel experts, Grubhub.
Shout out Grubhub.
Shout out Grubhub. Sponsor Lowlights. Use code Lowlights.
Right, exactly. To get your free bagels.
Maybe someday.
The Lowlights special.
All right. Okay, so I can go?
Go.
All right. Well, I mean, a couple of these are going to have to be gimmies. Can I get... so I'm doing the top 5?
Top 5.
Most popular in the U.S.?
In the U.S., according to Grubhub.
Okay.
According to Grubhub on USA Today.
Okay. Okay.
As reported on USA Today.
All right. Top 5, give me a plain bagel.
Plain bagel is not on the list.
Plain bagel's not on the list?
Nope.
Wow. Okay.
Nope.
Never mind. Because I wasn't into plain. But I would have thought. Okay.
Can I get a swing and a miss?
Can you give me everything bagel?
Everything bagel is number 3.
All right. Everything bagel's number 3.
Yeah.
Jeez. All right. Give me a sesame bagel.
Sesame bagel is not on the list.
Sesame bagel's not on the list.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Give me cinnamon raisin bagel.
Number 2.
Oh my gosh. Is this a list of like what people buy the most at Dunkin' Donuts? Just like as a Jewish,
according to Grubhub's
as a Jewish
top
person
flavors in the U.S. are
as a Jewish person, I'm baffled by my countrymen in this regard. You all need to really think more about it,
Dave. I'm honestly not sure you're gonna get all of these.
I know. Well, this is hard. Like, do we have like a? Tell me this: are there like weird flavors on the list where you were like, what?
Yes.
Okay, like is there something like blueberry on the list?
Dave, blueberry is number 1.
Oh my god. Are you serious?
Yes.
Who is out there eating? Okay, you all need to email me. Who is eating a blueberry? I'm a Jewish person. I eat bagels a lot. How many blueberry bagels have I eaten in my entire life, Gevin? The answer is like 2.
I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I mean, Panera's blueberry bagels with cream cheese aren't bad, and that's really the only place I ever see blueberry bagels. That's what I'm saying.
Look, I think the
I've
two of us
never walked into a bagel place in New York City and seen a blueberry bagel.
I think the two of us can agree, and everybody listening, I hope, can agree. Like, the best use of a blueberry in the morning is in a muffin. You want a blueberry muffin,
definitely,
before you want a
blueberry pancakes,
or blueberry pancakes for sure. Before I want a blueberry bagel. Get real, people. All right, fine. I've got 3.
Okay, so you've got the top 3: blueberry, cinnamon raisin, everything. You've got 4 and 5 left.
I mean,
and I think you should know enough about this ranking to know it's probably not going to be any flavors you'd expect.
No. All right. Give me. I'm trying to think. Like now that you said Panera, I'm thinking like, okay, what's a Panera like?
That's actually really good. That's a good line of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what about like a cheddar bagel or like
very close, different cheese.
Asiago.
Number 4.
Great. What are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, that's good, but like, what are we doing here, people? All right, give me. I'm trying to now think. Like,
do you want a hint for number 5?
I'm trying to think what we lovingly refer to as the goyim, as Jews. I'm trying to think what
I don't think this flavor exists in Yiddish.
Something. Let's give me something weird. Jalapeno.
No. Do you want a hint though?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So definitely like stay away from Panera for this one. But it's not an actual flavor. Like
not an actual
it's
flavor.
Not a flavor. This flavor has no flavor.
Like wheat or like
good guess, but no.
like what? Like give me a little bit more here.
Like think appearance. Think color. Think Instagram.
Oh, like a rainbow bagel or
rainbow
like
bagel. Rainbow bagel number 5.
Oh, come on. Come on, America. Come on, America. I just...
The real American lowlight.
This is a real lowlight for this country. I am so sorry, folks. I just... That is... Yeah. I just disagree is how I feel. And so I'll tell you. So if the next question is going to be, all right, Dave, you think that everybody's taste is so terrible. What's yours? Yeah. Look, everybody has their own preference. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum. If you really want... And I'm not saying the blueberry bagels are terrible. It's just like to be the most popular bagel in America... Like, but yeah, I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum. Although I did think that when Cynthia Nixon said like she wanted like a lox on her cinnamon raisin bagel, I remember that to be a really weird choice. That's my go-to when I'm go to a bagel place. You can pretty much tell I'm going to order an everything bagel. I'm going to get it toasted. I'm going to get scallion cream cheese and lox on it.
Okay.
So
I mean, if you won't yuck America's yum, I won't yuck your yum. But I'll tell you,
my go-to.
My order's probably even weirder. Not to say that yours, I pretty much just did say that yours was weird. But I go with a sesame bagel toasted with chicken salad on it.
In the morning though, like that's a good lunch order. But like,
no, it's like a brunch. It's a brunch time order.
All right, look again.
If it's okay, my thing with like the everything bagel, and Monica loves everything bagels and everything but the bagel dips and seasonings and all
from
that.
Trader Joe's in particular.
From Trader Joe's. Like to me, shout out Trader Joe's. It's a little bit too much garlic and onion in the morning, so that's kind of why I avoid those flavors. If I were to have I had a bagel for breakfast this morning. I did a poppy seed with plain cream cheese.
A good flavor.
Like that's a nice classic. The last thing I'll say, if you wanted to know, according to Grubhub, once again, our most reputable source on
obviously bagel experts, Grubhub,
popular bagel orders. For bagel sandwiches, here are the top 5: bacon, egg, and cheese, steak, egg, and cheese, avocado and egg.
Oh, I'm here for it. Those are all delicious so far. Yeah.
Tofu, cream cheese, and lox.
Okay, look, I'm not trying to hate on the vegans. They got to eat too. Although, like the vegans I know have that have like peanut butter on their bagels. If you want to keep it vegan, like I would probably rather have that than tofu cream cheese.
Is that what tofu cream cheese means? Okay, so it's not like tofu with cream cheese. It's tofu cream cheese?
No, I think it's tofu cream cheese so the vegans can eat it, which is fine. Like, whatever. But like if you're vegan, why not like, I don't know, peanut butter is to me better than vegan cream cheese. But
I didn't know you could cream a tofu.
Or whether you should. Now, that's a different question. Lots of things you can do, Gevin. But again, even as a Jewish person, not here to gatekeep. People can have whatever they want. If they like a rainbow bagel that just looks pretty but like doesn't change the taste at all, go for it.
It's all about allyship and coalition building.
Correct. If that's what that's for, go ahead and do it. Although maybe try to reflect that policy a little bit better at the ballot box. Yeah. Anyway, so this has been our episode for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please do leave a review. We say this every time, but we wouldn't say it if it didn't matter. So do it. Please leave a review. Email us, and
Lowlights podcast at valormedianetwork.com. Or we also realized you could email lowlights at valormedianetwork.com. So take your pick. We'll put them on the screen and in the description.
Great. Well, even to make it even more confusing.
Definitely.
But all right, everyone. We'll see you right back here next week.